Aren't you too busy today? Hi, Ben. Um, yeah, so the plan was to try and squeeze in a couple of workshops today. So I agreed I would do something about um, representational representational magic today. So and then I think Liam's going to do something a little bit later. So we're going to see how that goes.
The art of divination.
Right. Oh, is that what you're doing? I can't remember.
I need to pull something out
I,
my ass last minute, so I figured,
oh,
might
okay.
as well do
Fair
that.
enough. Cool. Right. So I'm going to go with so for what would be representational magic. So to a certain extent, the broadest term would we call it by another term, which would be sympathetic magic. So the idea that you would use things that represent other things in your practice. So um, on that, obviously, that could be literally anything. So that's when somebody does knot magic, for example, where they tie a knot when they're talking about connecting somebody together, or hand fasting is a particular obvious one where you're binding two people together. All of that is representational magic. The most obvious ones, obviously, just again grabbed things from around the house. So obviously, most obvious would be a besom, in the sense that it is a mini version of a broom, and therefore is used for cleansing or sweeping or clearing out. It's not a working broom; doesn't actually work as a broom, but it is representational of that. Um, and therefore we use that. It's then a case of then building those layers within, where what the wood is made of, what the bristles are made of, in order to add on that significate the signifiers on there. So with these ones in particular, they're made with rosemary, which some people will tell you will be for protection, but it has so much more capability than that, particularly for cleansing out the mind. Emptying the mind is particularly a good one, or expanding horizons. These are basic blonde, blockings, etc., etc. And then yeah, so it's kind of like um, so the next obvious one after that, which everybody loves to talk about when you start talking about representational magic, is poppets.
Or
Oh,
voodoo dolls.
poppets,
Is it puppets or
voodoo
voodoo
dolls,
dolls?
or whatever you call them. So obviously in the European tradition, we call them poppets rather than dolls or voodoo dolls, but particularly because their history comes from a very different set of principles. So everybody thinks a voodoo doll is about dark magic and cursing people. And obviously, they're not at all. Actually, traditionally speaking, even in voodoo practice, they were used for healing people. The pins were for directing energy, which is what everybody is then cinematized, or however you want to put it,
Like
into popular
acupuncture.
culture. Yeah, like acupuncture. So it'd be a case of you would direct that energy into a point that needs healing. Sounds like it looks like Liam's itching to say something, so just step in and out as you feel like it. Go
Well,
on.
you can fuck people up with it if you want to.
Oh, see, he had to drop the F bomb. Of course he did.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean, that's why you invited me on your workshop, wasn't it? I
What, so
say
you
the
can drop
things
the F bomb?
I I say the things that you're thinking, but wouldn't
Okay,
say because you're too polite.
okay.
Isn't that how this
Too
partnership
polite.
works?
Suppose, maybe. So yeah, so what we were trying to point out, well, I was trying to point out before Liam decided to drop the F bomb, was we were talking about representational magic and puppets. So traditionally in European witchcraft, they're used as protection. So traditionally, you would make a effigy or a shape of normally a newborn. You would take bits of their hair, etc., as they were born, and it guarded them in their bedtime. So obviously, children would spend as much time, original time, when they're first born in their cots. Obviously, when this started to happen, so you're talking hundreds of years ago, is a case of it wasn't guaranteed that a child was going to survive. So you would be putting whatever possible energy you could be into keeping, keeping that child for as long as possible. And the best way to do that was obviously protection charms, and that's where the poppet was born. So, it would be made out of little parts of them. It would be kept in their bed, or their cot, or, where they spent half their day anyway. And it protected them while they sleep, while they're there. And like I said, it would start with bits of them were always included. So bits of hair or saliva or anything like that that was then included into that process to make it personal, to connect to them specifically. And then obviously as it grows, the child would, keep it as a charm themselves, and that's where rag dolls come from. Um, so the idea of this protective guardian that was sat over. So obviously, as time's gone on, we use poppets for all sorts of mischief. I'm sure Liam will no doubt want to tell you all the horrible things he can do with one.
There's one in the
Um,
garage right now.
oh,
It's not
you
one
not
of
got
mine.
rid of him yet?
It's a client's one, and I got to go
Okay,
and bury them somewhere.
okay. So yeah, so it's the great part of a great part about them is that it's about connecting with that individual. So it's the main reason you would use one is to connect to the person you want to either do magic to, or protect from magic, and therefore they are perfect for using for all manner of spellcraft. So they don't have to be complicated. They don't have to include bodily functions of any description. They can be as simple as kind of
No
corn dollies,
biologicals.
no
I
biologicals
I
needed.
like working with the biologicals. I mean, the
Oh,
collection process is the funnest part, isn't it?
well, depends how you look at it.
Depends what you're collecting, I suppose.
Yeah, it does depend on what you're collecting. Me, as you well know, me personally, I prefer to use energy. It's a lot less to clean up afterwards. It's a lot easier to dispose of. And also there's the fact that biologicals tend to attract creepy crawlies. Is the other reason that I don't like using them, but it's probably the exact reason that Liam likes to use them. So, so it's a case of actually, if you're wanting to do something kind, less kind to them, or you're trying to do harm, then obviously at that point, biologicals are a great way. Attract the pests in, let the pest eat the dolly alive, and work its way through its process. But yeah, but back to effigy. So representational magic, the most obvious form is effigy. So you can do that in any kind of way. That is, some people like to make little wax figurines, little dollies. Obviously, you could simply just take bits of, I found some raffia out. You could quite easily, I'll do this while I'm talking to you. You could quite easily make a basic little dolly, just by, twisting some together. Before you know it, you then add a head onto the top, a little bit of a body, wrap him around his neck, make sure he's nice and tight. And then before you know it, you've got a little dolly that you can do all sorts of horrible things to, I'm sure, Liam. Um,
I don't just do nasty things. You're giving me a reputation here.
but what
I do
basically
healing
starts
and
as
all
a
sorts of stuff.
what basically starts as a little dolly, twist the arms out. I would normally do all sorts of fancy plaits and things, but I'm not going to do that for you now, because that would just be showing off, wouldn't it? But essentially, what you're starting to build is a little person in order to do something with. Obviously, Liam likes his little walnut man. I did make one of those earlier too,
Oh.
but we'll talk through that in a minute. But essentially, yeah, you're starting with that. It doesn't need to look like the person at all. This is for directing energy out. So for you, it's a case of you are making whatever makes you connect with this in the first instance is the best. So if you need it to look like that person, the 21st century now, cut out a picture from a photograph, stick his face on the top or her face on the top, if that makes you connect with the doll best, I'm at the point now where I don't even need a doll. I just go and corrupt a few rose quartz or something. But you'll have heard all about that in sorry, our podcast. If
I
you
don't
ever
think
got
that
round to
one
listening to that one,
that one's
did that
not
one not
come out
make the
yet.
cut?
No, no, no. It made the cut. It's just not. It's not out yet. I think that's a couple of weeks' time. We're like
Oh,
We're
is
about
it?
a month ahead
Oh,
so
okay.
far.
So at
Yeah.
some point, I'll tell you all the horrible things that because everybody thinks that Liam is the dodgy one, whereas apparently he keeps trying to tell me that it's actually me, and that these people are all wrong,
No, that's
and
not
it's
true.
not. It couldn't possibly be, blue-eyed boy over there. He couldn't
No,
possibly be
that's
the
not it
nasty
at
one.
all.
So anyway,
I get angry probably easier than you do, but I cool off quicker and I forgive more. For you, it's very, if they drive you to that point, then that's it. You're sending a tornado after them.
I just wake up with blood on my hands. That's all. That's all. I black out, red mist, and wake up covered in blood the next day, and you just got something to tidy up.
So I've got
But
a question when it comes
go on.
to the specifically talking about puppets. So do you think more people nowadays use puppets compared to pictures? Because you can just download pictures from Facebook and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
can't you? So do you think that there's a decline in people using puppets and instead people are using photographs? Or do you think that what would you say about that?
I don't know. Popular culture. I always jump to the craft. That's my favourite reference.
What, the
Um,
film?
the film The Craft. Yeah. And
Okay.
obviously, technically, what she does when she's trying to do that little binding in the bathroom, and she's just got a photograph of the other girl, and in this is literally just wrapping a binding round. In that moment, that is essentially a puppet, and that's what I'm talking about. So in that moment, it is just that. That picture is all that's required. Now, it really depends on what you want to do with the puppet. Like if you simply just need their face to focus on, then you don't need much more than a photograph. Whereas actually, if you're wanting to do so, my favorite uses for puppets involve putting thoughts in somebody's head. So if you're trying to do that kind of manipulation, having that puppet means that all of a sudden you're no longer having to focus on the makeup of this puppet, what it looks like or what it is. You've got the puppet, you've made the connection to the person. At that point, you haven't. It's on autopilot. Then that exists as a little effigy of that person. So opening up its head, which is obviously why I like puppets, is you can stuff them. Um, Means you can open up the top of that head, push the thoughts in, literally, then tie it back up and let the rest of it do its job. So it then talks to the rest of it and hands over that's what it is doing. Um, and that's what I like so much about puppets is making something untangible tangible. Um, so actually, in that moment, you are no longer having to focus on the person or the connection. That's already well established. What you're doing is is focusing on the work that you want to do, and that's why I like a puppet. But to answer your question, sorry, um, is that yeah, I think it's 50-50. I think some people are put off by the idea of using puppets because they've watched too many scary movies, um, where you kind of like you've got some kind of in it's evil and all that kind of stuff. Um, Whereas actually, I think if you understand a puppet, I think you go to a puppet first rather than just using a photograph.
Mm,
Like with a simple binding, then why would you even go to the extent of actually making a puppet?
yeah.
Um, Even something as simple as your little your little walnut man. So I call it a walnut man because Liam likes to put walnuts in as a substitute for the brain. So that's a
They look
perfect,
like
perfect.
brains
They do.
and they
Um,
burn brilliantly.
yeah, Doctrine of Signature says, use what mirrors life across from one species to another. So it's perfect for that. It looks like a brain. you want to damage the brain, so put it in. The other great thing about it is another one of those biological ones. You could just stick this in a box of rats and let the rats eat the contents, or birds, or you know, the fact that there is something tasty in the middle for somebody to eat. But
Have you
again,
seen
I've
those
gone to the
those
nefarious routes.
those Dixie dolls? I was going to say, have you seen those?
The Dixie doll.
Dixie
Which
dolls
ones are they?
basically they're puppets, but they're made out of I don't know what they're made out of, to be honest with you. But you consecrate them, and then you can
Okay.
feed them to your dog, and they're basically dog
Oh,
food,
okay.
and then the dog shits them out.
Wow.
But yeah,
After you've enjoyed
they're a
all the way
popular thing.
through.
I've seen them online. I've seen them online.
No,
Sorry,
I've
I
not seen
interrupt.
those. But of course you have. Of course you found something that involves being eaten alive, don't you? But yeah, so essentially that's what we're talking about, is that making that focus of that person. You know, this doesn't look like anybody, but you don't need it to look like anybody. And I think that's part of it. Traditionally, when you're talking about using them as protection, the focus is always on adding all those individual details like hair, etc. The only point of doing that is to a certain extent a lack of imagination. So if you that removes any opportunity for you to forget who it is. Um, where actually, you know, I could understand if you've got 30 different poppets on the go, which Liam probably does somewhere in his shed. But you know,
They're in the
the
doll's house.
if you've got about 30 different poppets going on, then you'd kind of understand it. You'd kind of understand needing to know which ones were which, and making sure that they look like those people. But in simple forms, the easiest thing, I went to go and grab some paper then. You could literally draw a picture. So I had an interesting chat with a client a few months ago, who she was saying how I was trying to explain how poppets work, and she was like, "Oh, okay, I think I've done something like that accidentally." And she was talking about how she had drawn a caricature of her son, and obviously he was got this big promotion coming up, a new job change that involved like multiple rounds of interviews. Like there were different levels to it. So obviously, what she did is she drew this. She drew all the things around him that make him amazing, and then just kept like drawing and drawing all these wonderful things over this period of weeks while this was going on. And she just pinned it up in her studio where she works. And literally every time she'd look at it, she'd just, you know, throw that energy at it, going, "You're amazing, you'll do great, you'll be fine." And you know, lo and behold, every time, um, you know, he'd get through the next round and the next round, and she would just keep adding every time, and the next round come and next round come. She just keep, and like I say, every day throwing that energy over it at that effigy. And then after the few weeks, eventually, obviously, he got the job. Like, you know, it wouldn't be a story worth telling if he didn't get the job. But, you know, and I said, well, that's exactly what it's doing. You need a focal point of the energy, and that looks like that person. So you don't have to focus on remembering who that person is. You're just focusing on the work itself. Go on, you look like you want to
So
say
what
something.
about consecrated? If we're talking about dolls then,
Yeah.
or puppets, what about consecrated dolls or puppets versus unconsecrated ones? So if you're talking about like the one I did for a client whose name I can't mention publicly,
Yeah.
um, where I produced the doll, but made it as a doorway for that person to then interact with the doll. So essentially, I created a portal vortex in the form of a doll that was fashioned to look like
Yeah.
said bastard ex-husband, and then gave
Yes.
it to said client, and then the client can do the work following that. Because obviously, there's the difference between that is the fact you've got the doll, which is open, an open doorway. So whatever
Yeah.
you do with that doll is going to manifest, as opposed to the visualization and the it just being an image to represent your focus, kind of like a scale electric car. When you take it off the track, it doesn't work. So when you're not giving it attention, it doesn't work. Whereas the opposite is kind of like one of those ones which has got a battery in. So what about your approach in terms of actually working with or making those? Is there a difference for you? How would you go about
Well,
that?
I would only ever limit one if I was being paid for the work. Let's just say that. Normally, I would get the client to do it.
Mm,
So I had a client more recently where I convinced her a doll was the best option, or should I say, we agreed together that she really wanted to try a doll, um, and that set the parameters as to how and best for them to work with it. And with that particular one, it was a case of, well, how do I use it? And she was used to energy work, so the easiest option for me was to kind of go, well, actually, just take a blank white, clear quartz crystal with you, take a piece of him with you afterwards, energetically speaking, put that in the doll. No need for actual biologicals, other than the fact that there is a transference that's occurring when she collects the energy. But um, the nice part about that is she understood the process. So whereas with a client for yourself, when you're having to limit somebody else's tool, just because they may not mean to, do something um, untoward
mm.
or accidental, should we say? Um, yeah, so I would probably only consecrate if I was handing them over to somebody else, and I wanted to limit the effect it could possibly have. Whereas, I don't put any restrictions on mine. Do you
Okay.
put restrictions on yours?
Um, Normally what I'll do is because the only time I would ever work with a doll would be to create a permanent gateway or doorway
Connection.
to that person. Yes, a connection to that person. And normally it's because I'm wanting someone else to work with that. So very often
Yeah,
the client's paying me or getting me to open the doorway, kind of like Papa Legba. I open the doorway and close it up, which is why I've currently
yeah,
got that one sitting in the box, is because they craved me to create the doorway. I gave it to them. They're now finished with it, so they're giving it back for me to close that doorway again, dispose of correctly. Partly because I know that if that person decided to burn it or something like that, then there's probably a case of
yeah, yeah.
spontaneous combustion. So they've done their work. But
Which is a
so it
fun one.
representational magic and it representing stuff. What about what are your thoughts on the correspondences? Because obviously correspondences in a spell or the ingredients of a spell really are supposed to represent something. What do they represent and why are people kind of obsessed with the correspondences? And the charts of this crystal does this, that does that.
Is that not just because that's how people are these days? They look at it like a science, that you've got to have this version and that version and this and that and add them all together and, you know, A plus B equals C. Like,
Well, there's, I'm wondering whether they know why you use that. Because for me, I would never use an ingredient in a spell or a piece of work if I didn't understand why that was there.
yeah,
Whereas I think, at least with when it comes to cooking, because I like to bring cooking up. If I was
it's
to
a good
follow a
analogy. It's fine.
recipe, if I was to follow a recipe for a shepherd's pie or something, then I would just follow that recipe and I wouldn't need any knowledge of what those components do to put it in because I know the flavor will be, if I follow the recipe right, you know,
A meaty potato
a
pie.
meaty potato pie. Whereas, that's not really true for magic, essentially, is it? Because you need to empower the ingredients, I suppose, and understand what the purpose of them is in order to make them work, I think, most of the time, or at least work well.
Yeah, well, I always make them work with them. And so if I was going to stuff something, so for example, with this lady who, didn't need to use, she still filled it with herbs. I made her sit and it all sat, she selected the items. For me, it was a case of making that connection. That was paramount, because I wasn't doing the work for her. So to me, it was, what are these ingredients that require that connection to be made? Actually, make it what the actual doll itself was made out of didn't matter either way. Um, Obviously, I did say, a great one is men don't tend to notice a sock going missing. So, um, that has the bonus of being technically a biological, but not actually. But um,
Pants are my favorite.
yeah, exactly. So like they're like, it's one of those items that is worn every day and therefore absorbs a certain amount of bodily fluid. And
If you're missing some socks, guys, or at least you've got
yeah,
odd pairs of socks, I'd start worrying.
might might not be pixies, it might actually be check
Your
your ex
wife.
isn't doing something or your wife isn't actually corrupting parts of you. Um, but yeah, so for me, it would be selection of those items and what is possible. So, my first questions were, are you still seeing the guy? Can you get hold of X, Y, and Z? If not, that's not a problem. We can find substitutes for those things. Because at the end of the day, the key is making that connection. Now, as well as I would, like we just kind of, open up a portal, rip a piece out, and put that directly into the doll.
Steal a
Um,
piece of your soul and put it in the doll. Yeah, that's generally
yeah, but
when I do the
go
portals, that's what generally happens.
just take some of the energy yourself and just put it into the doll. That's simple enough. Whereas somebody who's kind of earlier on their path than that needs those
Yeah.
parts to make that connection. So for me, it would be a case of a conversation with them that decides what should they add, what shouldn't they add. I don't, you know me, I don't stick to correspondence. If anything, I like a correspondence in order to bend a correspondence.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Like,
definitely. Like your rose
like
quartz.
me rose quartz, or what was that one we were trying to do with those hex sticks?
Oh,
Oh, the
smudge
Valerian.
sticks. Yeah, that's it.
And
So
everybody was like, "What are you using Valerian for? It's protective." I said no, but it's actually really good at getting into the mind, and obviously that's the best place to go and put a little hex. Like, surely,
yeah. People may be familiar with smudge sticks, sage smudge sticks for used for, banishing and that kind of thing. Well, we're creating a hex smudge stick. So rather than banish, you're actually
yeah,
drawing in a lots of nasty energy. And we've picked a
yeah.
Valerian because people think that Valerian's quite nice, but actually it has some unusual correspondences. Ben on the chat's got a question. Um,
Oh,
as with all magic, can it go wrong and come back on you?
oh, that sounds like one of those threefold things.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you establish a connection, and that's kind of where we get the most of our clients that come from hoodoo
They're the
practitioners
ones that
who
get it wrong, you mean?
have got it wrong, and it's normally because their practice involves a lot of uh, what was the word you keep using for them? Biologicals.
I would probably step in and say, right, out of the clients that we do have, the ones that have messed something up are often the hoodoo practitioners because they've
Yeah,
overdone it. And the ones which get into the most trouble are the New Agers and, dare I say, the W word Wiccans, not because they've done something, but because they haven't done something. So they're
yeah,
normally the ones that upset someone or something and get a kick up the ass. Whereas at least the hoodoo practitioners, they've messed something up because they've made a mistake. So at least
yeah,
one lot of those people is actually doing something. The other lot, essentially, they've just been a pain in the ass. So I wouldn't say,
yeah.
I wouldn't say that hoodoo in general is necessarily a bad thing or a
No,
crap
no, no.
system or anything.
But
Yeah,
you just have to understand the system, and the system
yeah,
involves, which is like with voodoo, and why they use a lot of and I've lost it again. Biologicals is normally down to the fact that they are trying to establish a lasting connection.
mm,
Now, that's where you have the most opportunity for something to come back up the other way. So,
mm,
a skilled practitioner wouldn't worry about that because of the way that they're making it, the way that they are charging it, the way that they're sending energy down that decision. What we were talking about by hoodoo practitioners, a lot of people use things like honey jars, which are great at sweetening a deal, but at the end of the day, they forget they still require a lasting connection. and the part of that is the bit that they forget. Um, so there are, too many options for things to come back up that connection. If you understand that that's how the connection works, then you know how to protect against it. But it's just, dolls are one of those where you are establishing some kind of connection. If it is an unconsecrated, doll, if you've consecrated, then you've already prepared for those. It's a one-way connection, or it only has set parameters for certain things. But if you're doing a very basic representational magic spell with, like I say, a drawing of a loved one that you want to send positive energy to, then that is a one-way connection that could connect both ways, but you've not gone to the level of actually establishing a connection. You are throwing energy at an effigy. That is what you are doing. There is less opportunity there for something to come back because you're throwing energy one way. When you're establishing a connection, that's different.
What about
There's opportunity
morality?
there.
So I
Morality,
think
what's that?
you've talked about the threefold law and you've talked about ethics. I'm wondering if Ben means in terms of, is there an angel on the cloud, an angel on a cloud somewhere that's going to say that person's doing something nasty, I'll teach them a lesson. I know we've got a video on ethics going on the YouTube channel at some point over the weekend, but a lot of people have that question, don't they?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that just depends on a person's paradigm, doesn't it? At the end
As
of the
above,
day,
so below.
yeah,
That's what they like to say, isn't it?
uh, yeah. So it's one of those things. If that's how your paradigm works, then I understand you preparing for that, and you should be making sure that you are prepared for that. It's not part of mine.
Mm.
I know very little will have that I would do in this lifetime will have an impact on my next one, unless I mean it to. So that's when I tend to, which is I think what we covered largely in the talk that we did, is that actually that is the part of it, isn't it, for us? Is that at the end of the day, this is just one life.
Well,
Um,
I mean, yeah, I've always likened it to I like the as above, so below kind of principle because when you look at the magical world and then you look at the mundane world, in the mundane world, there's governments, organizations, people, very diverse. Um, and in the magical world, then it's no real difference. You'll get complete assholes in the mundane world that will cut you up when you're driving along, and you'll get
yeah,
things and people like that in the magical world. And there's, so say, people that band together, and you can think about police driving down the road, going for a speed camera, that kind of thing. Something's watching you and it's got the power to intervene because it doesn't like what you're doing. Well, that can be the case in the magical world as well. But you would think a bit, what you're going to
but
do to counteract that, and
yeah,
whether there is.
that's based on an idea that they're actually interested. What are you
Yeah, most of the
actually
time it's
doing
not a case of
on a
anything
large
as
enough
interesting.
scale?
I,
Why
I
would you be
think
doing anything on a large enough scale that attracts
I
the
think
attention of?
the difference is that what people tend to think is they think that they don't really understand the power concept of it. So
No.
when you're, I suppose, a fledgling baby witch, because I'll use that term because you hate it and it's the latest thing,
Yeah,
latest craze,
thanks.
um, it doesn't take a lot to interfere with your magic, essentially, what you're doing. It doesn't take a lot of an effort for
No.
an adept or someone or something to interfere with it. However, when you get to the point where you are more quote unquote powerful, is what people would probably say, then it's more difficult for things to interfere. And also,
Yeah.
depending on the type of work that you're doing, the more aware you are, because you're talking about psychic work as well, the more aware you are of the situation, what knock-on effect is going to have, what is, you know, what's going to stand in the way of that work or help that work along, the more able you are to go with the flow or fight against the current more effectively. Again, Ben's got another question. Do you tend to have more women clients than men? I suppose we should both answer this because I don't know whether it would be the same.
No. I suppose the majority of my personal clients are probably more women. but actually, in the grander scheme of things, I think it evens itself out. It just
What
feels like more regular.
what about mentoring when you teach? Is it more men or
Mentoring,
women?
I don't think. I'm trying to think if I've ever taught a guy actually. I've had conversations and obviously client conversations with men. I don't think I've actually trained any men.
Okay. That's interesting. So for me personally, I found that in terms of people wanting to learn magic and people, the difference between the sexes there and then the sexes of coming to pay you to do some work for them, there's probably not really a difference in the amount of men versus women in terms of the approach they want to take or what they're asking you to do. That I do find a difference with. So when it comes to people paying
Yeah,
me to do work, very often men will come and they'll want to see the future or do things that are money related, business related.
yeah,
Whereas women is normally love's probably the
emotionally
most
led.
popular thing. Yeah, love or hate is really the
Yeah,
top one. Protection somewhere in there. When it comes to teaching, what I do find is that a lot more women are attracted to the word witchcraft, and a
yeah,
lot more men are attracted to the word or term occultism, and it shows in the methods in which they the things that they already work with. So I find that more men tend to work with ceremonial magic and more women tend to work from an intuitive witchcraft perspective.
yeah. But then I teach a
However,
lot less of that, don't I? So
yeah, yeah. So that's the only thing I think is in terms of what people want and what the approach is. There's quite a lot of interest in history when it comes to differences between men and women, um, with magical practices and titles, and when it goes to traditions of magic, that kind of a thing. But oh look, there's another question.
yeah, I
What
just
courses do you to teach? You can talk about the Patreon and all of that kind of stuff.
um literally at the end of the day, we'll teach anything with it. Between the two of us, we probably cover most types of practice. Not necessarily, and by that I don't mean necessarily that we are experts in all of those fields, but we have enough of a grounding in most types of practice in order to pretty much cobble a beginner's course to most things together.
We can, yeah,
Probably some of them,
when it comes to consultation work,
yeah,
I'd say we can give you whatever you want.
yeah,
However, when it comes to teaching, we'll teach you our style of witchcraft and magic, and
yeah,
we'll try and adapt it to how you view things. Um, but if someone asked me to start teaching them hoodoo and that, I understand the basics of hoodoo, but I understand a lot about the magical principles at play. So
yeah.
what I'd more
And equal,
likely do is take
yeah.
that hoodoo that you want to practice and blend that with what the difference between us is, I suppose.
And then there are things that we could teach, and there are things that we just don't teach. So
Mm,
I really don't like teaching tarot. I can teach it, but I just don't feel that you would get a particularly good experience with me on the basis that I
he
look
hates
down
it.
my nose at it. So
Yeah.
I know that will corrupt the experience that you might be having, and therefore isn't
Mm,
particularly helpful. Whereas
yeah.
if you wanted to come and learn a completely different process with me that I
Norm
do enjoy,
Normally, what we would do is we hold various different events, and at those events, there are set workshops. Now, the set
yeah,
workshops are always basic and beginner. What we then try to do is try to encourage you to either contact us with super specific problems and
needs,
questions, needs that you want, because you are teaching yourself, um, or we would work from an apprenticeship perspective because we don't
yeah,
really do the book recommendations. When it
no,
comes to magical practice, every person's unique, and throughout history, since the dawn of time, magic has always been taught from an apprenticeship perspective. You have someone walk
Yeah.
you through it and do it with you. And because we
Because it's a
don't,
craft.
yeah, it's a craft and an art form. So we don't produce curriculums for the
No.
masses. What we do is we take one or two people that come to us from either from an event or something like that, say, look, I really want to learn this. We'll then sit down with them. Normally they'll join the Patreon for £3 a month, I think it is, something like that, for the first
Yeah.
year. And then we just basically talk to them, assess them, and then set homework based on what they want to achieve. So we
Yeah.
don't try to progress you to a certain level. You have to tell us what level you want to get to. That's the problem, because it means
Yeah.
how what your paradigm is. How big can you
Yeah.
dream?
People want to go on a course and go, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then get
Yeah.
to the end. Whereas it's a craft. At the end of the day, if you you know, if you're a glass blower and actually what you wanted to do was the really, really fine stuff, we'll do everything that was necessary to get you to the really, really fine stuff. If actually what you wanted to do was huge vessels, then you train in that direction. It really depends on what the skill set you're trying to achieve. Ben's asked another question. For beginners, what would be some of the good books to read to start you off? Literally, read anything.
Yeah,
I'm
because
not. I'm
they're all
not going to
just as
do.
good as each other. They're all crap.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, you'll find that most of the things you'll read, you'll know instantly, and trust your gut on it. Really, is the best advice we could give. If you don't like the way something sounds, and it probably not isn't working for you, there is no set way of practicing. There are universal laws, but those things you'll learn with time. They're not
Mm.
necessarily going to be written down anywhere worth reading. At the end of the day, beyond the beginner stuff where they're suggesting what candle this is and what crystal that should be used for, is a brand that you can always look at them and go across them, flick through. I've got a crazy amount of correspondence chart books. I don't use them, but they're nice to sometimes go, oh, we did that the other day. I wonder what it said, like out of
Yeah.
curiosity afterwards. Um, After the work's done, like it's very rare I would look at a correspondence chart before I did a work. Um, you know,
Yeah.
look at how we've, how we do charm bags, for example. It's sitting them and making them do it blind. It's the best way to do it because you connect the best way that way. And it's the same with books. Flick through them. I used to play this game. We're going so off topic. I used to play this game where you would just open a book at a random sentence. You'd find one of these.
Bibliomancy.
Yeah. And
A,
just
a
open the
complete
random
book of
book and
witchcraft.
go, oh, I wonder what that is.
A
A
complete
complete
book
book of
of witchcraft.
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 And
It's an
who might that
incomplete.
be written by?
It's an incomplete complete book of witchcraft because it probably doesn't have a lot in it. I'll say something very controversial because I like to say
Go on.
controversial things because I'm an asshole. Um, all of the books are pretty much the majority of the books are going to be crap, even the really good ones that I can recommend, and I can recommend books which I personally like and explain why I like them. But when it
Yeah.
comes to learning, each one, if you're lucky, might have a little bit of golden nugget of information in it. The majority of the rest of it will be crap. What I'll say when it comes to reading and books and YouTube videos and podcasts and all that kind of stuff is that you need to be practicing more than you're reading. So if you're
Yeah.
spending a day reading a book, then you need to be spending more than a day doing actual magic. So when it gets
Yeah.
to the point where you're reading and researching more than you're practicing, that's bad because you'll
Yeah.
learn a hell of a lot more from mistakes than you
And
will
by that,
from opinion.
yeah, and by that I kind of clarify. I guess what you're trying to say is, that might be going for a walk. It
Yeah,
might be that you spend, a couple of hours at your favorite museum or whatever, where you're applying that. So you're looking for the things that are missing. You're looking for what is there, what isn't there, what are you seeing in between. The same when you're going for a walk. how does the water sound? How does the air sound?
Oh,
Um,
that sounds so new
you
agey.
I know, but I couldn't help it. But you know what I mean? Like it's just experiencing it is what we mean. We don't necessarily mean you need to spend a day of writing spells
Oh
on
no,
the
don't
fact that
do
you've just
that.
spent a day reading about them. Like, you
Never
know what I
write
mean?
us.
Like,
Never write spells or make a book of shadows. Don't do that.
how, the very best, keep notes. We're not saying we don't
Mm.
journal.
Journal is
Um,
probably the
and
best thing.
journal's probably the best way to call it. But, copying out pages upon pages of correspondences into a book of shadows is a complete waste of your time. All you're doing is learning someone else's method.
Yeah.
Yes, they may all line up to a certain extent because they fall into certain categories. Like, there are always going to be, like, literally, try and find what's he gone to look for? Try and find a book of correspondences. There you go, that's the one. Try and find a book of
This is what you
correspondences.
need to stay away from, okay? Stuff like that.
Don't
Not good.
the best the it doesn't matter what set of books you're going to look at. You can look at 30 different books with different lists of correspondences in. You will find the word protection on half of the things on that list, just because that's what's most commonly used. Like, it's because that's what most people are trying to do: protect from something or do damage to something. They fit, so which means that they've all at some point used those items for all of those purposes. And to give a good example, I'll go to the rose quartz thing. At the end of the day, rose quartz, it's pink. Um, I hate pink. There is no way on shape on this earth that I would ever use a rose quartz for attraction, love, any kind of protection. It would actually, to try and use that would probably cause me harm. It's one of those things where the connection is not there. I can't stand the colour pink. Um, I don't like any kind of senses that you get around it. But at the end of the day, it's a pink stone. Like, you could have just as easily picked up a clear quartz and gone, I want it to do this. It's a blank slate. If I was going for attraction, for example, would probably go for something more like a sodalite, or maybe even some lapis lazuli, something like that. That just kind of that have got that kind of rich blue. That's what attracts me. So I would use something like that. I like those colours, and those colours make me feel, um, an attraction. I'm drawn to those colours, so those are the colours I would use. You won't find in any, although you probably would, if you read enough Llewellyn books, you'll find one that says attract
Llewellyn
blue
book.
uses. Well, you just waved one at me.
Is that a
Um,
Llewellyn book?
well, they're Element, aren't they?
Damn.
Owned by the same people.
Well, I've heard
Um,
they're all owned by the Illuminati. Harper.
let's not go there. Um, Here we go. We've got another question. This has just turned into a live session, hasn't it, really? This
Yeah,
isn't.
that's fine.
And, what is the best spell you've ever experienced? What do you mean by experienced? Should you go with what?
What the
God.
funnest one was, I suppose? What the funnest one you've
Yeah,
done?
what was the most fun one you've done? Oh, I don't know.
Is it the fish spell?
I
There's
The
a fish
fish
spell
spell.
in this book, right, that involves, and you can buy this book and read it. I swear to God, I swear, all the gods and goddesses, myself included, I swear that this book has a spell in it that involves inserting a live fish in your vagina. Now, if we're
Okay.
talking about following cookbooks, because this is like a cookbook, why would you A, want to do that, and B, how does that even work? So if you can't tell me why you're using those ingredients and that procedure and how it's supposed to work, it's a spell you shouldn't be doing. And a lot of people would just think, oh, it's magic, so it's going to work if I put that fish up in my, you know, but
Yeah.
actually probably won't.
Okay. So Claire is quite clarified. She said both personally or professionally. So I'm trying to think what would be the. See, I go
What the
straight to the
funnest one
coolest. What
was.
would be the
The funnest
coolest?
one,
The funnest one.
I
I don't know.
suppose.
We talked about this morning about tornadoes. They were fun afterwards. Um,
Funnest,
but at the
funnest.
time, professionally, the most
It's
fun I
always when you're
probably
causing
had
mischief.
is called. I was going to say is when you've corrupted something. The most fun I have
Yeah.
is when is the most basic of spells. Really, is corrupting rose quartz to cause
Practical
breakups in
joke spells.
relationships. That's the
Yeah.
sort of stuff I like.
When like I get a kick, right? And it's a sick kick, I know, but I'm a bit of a sicko, right? Upsetting people, right?
Yeah,
So if it's got if whether it comes to politics or religion or whatever, I know when it comes to the professional stuff we do, I'm like proper professional. But in my personal life, if there's someone that has a really hard religious view, then I'll probably say something that I know is controversial for that person. If someone politically is too aligned to the left or the right, I'll say something the opposite to get a little bit of a little bit of rage started up because it's amusing. So
yeah,
normally anything like that when it comes to magic, I love to do. I always love picking on Wiccans and New Agers is what I love to do because they're the people which think that they know something and they very often don't and get into a lot of trouble. So when Chris talks about his rose quartz, we'll get a lot of New Age people, the sort of people that like to shop too much in crystal shops, buying rose quartz because they think that it's all about love and prosperity and that kind of thing. For me, the funnest kind of thing is to walk into one of those crystal shops in Glastonbury, stick my hand in the rose quartz section, and curse every single one of those rose quartzes. So when some hippie comes along and buys them, they're in for a bad string of luck. And do you know why that is? It's because they bought that bloody rose quartz thinking that it was good for them. I used to do a lot
so
worse things than that, but we won't go into that. That was all pretty fun.
but but it's I don't know what to say to that, other than the fact that we may possibly get banned from all of Glastonbury
Glastonbury?
shops now.
That's all right.
Um,
It's no big loss there.
but but yeah, essentially it's that sort of stuff. No, we don't. I wouldn't do massive amounts of harm for fun, unless you really have a reason to do it. Um, I, I'm a nice person, so I don't have lots of people that hate me, so it's fine. I
No, it's
don't
not
feel the
people
need to
that
have
hate
to
you,
do
it's
that
people
stuff.
that you hate. Like the people you just can't stand. I mean, seriously. I've listened to certain people on these oh, what is it? Like it's always the New Agers. Oh, I'm gonna say something really bad now, aren't I? You'll have to shut me up if I go too far. But certain occult festivals, it's not even the occult ones, normally psychic fairs and stuff like that, and they're
Yeah,
literally the kind of, I like to read angels, and angels surround you with goodness. And that. My idea of a good spell is to create a fake angel, an egregore, right?
yeah,
Package that up, send it on them, and have that stand in the way of the angel that they think they're talking to and themselves. So I've always, always, always got a massive kick. If it's not the New Ager, the one other thing that really does it for me is to really
but
mess around with
no,
psychics and cause trouble for psychics. I love it to the point
you
where
need
if we go and do one of those live events, one of those
you
events
need
like
to
a psychic
correct
fair,
that.
when they've got a demonstration of mediumship or a psychic ability, you know he's got to keep me out of the room because I'll be like, right, I'm gonna cause up some crap now because some of them just drive me crazy. I mean. There's one particular company which I'm not going to name, but I mean, I've only got to see one of their Facebook posts and it just drives me crazy. And we've had talks about whether, ethically speaking, um, we should we should play a trick on them. Um, but I think we decided not to, didn't we? Because it would just be too cruel. Because I
It's
mean,
not fair.
it's like shooting
But
fish
you
in a
need
barrel, isn't it?
you need to clarify because actually, where those sorts of things tend to happen are not at psychic fairs. those lots of things you tend to do when you're on these paranormal walks.
Oh, the paranormal investigation. I tell you what. Um, I'm not allowed to go to any paranormal events now. I used to go, I've been with various different people, but I'm not allowed to have anything to do with paranormal investigators. There's this really nice company, Keep Paranormal in Stourbridge, sort of Midlands way, which there's a couple of people that I think Ben might know them. They come to some of our events and stuff. Really nice people, and I really get on with them, but I'm really scared that I'll say or do something really kind of bad because my experience with paranormal investigators um, is we're from two ends of the spectrum. So witchcraft's
Yeah,
about keeping things secret and passing it on in secret, and paranormal investigations about let's expose everything as much as possible.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it comes to the point where it's like, ooh, this is really difficult dealing with people like that because you go into a paranormal investigation thing and they want to get their cameras out and those little boxes which make up lights and I don't really know what they do, but they make a light comes on and everyone, runs out of the room screaming or something. And like my idea
yeah,
is like, okay, let's start summing things up. Let's start causing
yeah.
some trouble
Let's bring
here.
them in.
Let's bring them in. Whereas it's kind
Let's
of
bring
like,
them
A,
in.
I'm not supposed to really do that because we're supposed to keep things secret. But also, if you're not running an event and stuff like that, like I've had some really close calls with a company called Haunted Happenings. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of those, but they do a lot of work and stuff like that. And I've literally left the room before because I'm like they've invited a psychic along, or they're doing this, or they're doing that, and I've only agreed to go because I've wanted access to the building that they're in
Yeah,
for my own
yeah.
nefarious purposes. Not always nefarious, but for my own purposes, we'll say.
Just to
And
bottle
it
something
just,
or pick something off.
yeah, exactly. And it gets to the point where you're kind of like, oh, I can't, I mean, there's this one time when they were all around this table doing it wasn't a Ouija board thing, but it's basically this tumbler, and they were going one side of the table for yes, one side of the table for
Okay.
no. And I was like, okay, let's actually, I'll get a spirit to do, we'll play a game or something like that. Why don't we play a game?
Yeah,
I said, I'll tell you what, there's something in the room over here. Happened to be a toilet, but you know. And
yeah,
I said, well, let's play a little game of cards with said spirit, and I'll prove to you that, you know, we'll see A, if this spirit's sentient, B, what it's capable of doing. Because that's the thing with witchcraft, is about practicality. If I can get a spirit to
yeah,
do my washing up because it can move objects down the room, that's witchcraft, that's practical. I'm not
yeah.
interested in finding out its backstory. I don't need any more friends than what I already got. None of that's for
No,
me. So basically,
which
we
aren't
got,
many.
which aren't many. You can see why. So we put all these. I basically found all of the queens, three queens and one king from a deck. Okay, a deck of normal
Yeah,
playing cards. Put them all upright in all four corners of the table. And then they were all upright. And I said, look, go to where the king is. The one king in three, out of four cards. It went to it. And then I turned them all upside down, asked it again, it went to it. I jumbled them all up, put them down every single time, no matter where I put, and none of the other people in the room could see it because I was shuffling it and putting it down. So only I knew it,
yeah,
where it was, and I didn't have my finger on the, it was a glass tumbler. I didn't have it on the glass tumbler. Didn't have no gin in it. Maybe if it had gin in it, I would have. But
maybe.
but yeah, and then we kind of proved that okay, so this spirit is relaying information, controlling this, but also it can see through the table. It can see clearly what's going on, where the king is, and we used
Yeah,
that kind of thing because it's something that everyone can replicate. And I tried to explain, this is what you should be doing. Who gives a crap about photographing something that someone's going to then turn around and say you made it up on Photoshop when you could
yeah,
be doing fun stuff like that, okay?
yeah.
And you
Because
know
let's
what I
face
was
it, you can
told
get
by
a.
the people in the group? Oh, that's
Go
too
on.
dark for us. It's like, wait a minute, we've just
Dark.
had a
Yeah, that's the
demonstration
one.
that this spirit
That's
can do
dark.
stuff, can see things. It's like, Why don't we start asking it other questions like, is there anything hidden here? Is there any money on the floor that other people, because it was a public place that was closed off for the evening. Is there any money that anyone can see that they can tell me someone's dropped a £20 note? You know, something like that. It's like, let's get some work going on here. Let's see
Yeah.
how it benefits us or me. But no, it was again, oh, we need to draw the session to an end now. You know, it's like,
We're
oh, I
all a
don't
bit
understand.
scared.
Anyway, this is why
Got a little
I'm
bit
not
too
allowed
close.
to talk about this subject because I'm just going to shut up now. And you know,
Okay.
this has turned out to be a really good representational magic workshop. I've got to do a divination one later. That's going to be fun, isn't it?
Oh dear. That's fine. I'll find ways to take you off topic. It'll all be
Oh,
fair.
you
It's
can
fine.
try. You can try. You know what buttons to push, though, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like we can ask the
But
pendulum some stuff about New Agers. I'll be there
no, let's
shaking it.
not.
No, no.
Okay. Back in your box now, Liam. Back in your
Okay,
box.
I should put myself on mute.
But yeah, I don't even know how to go try and get back onto topic after that. Um, but yeah, essentially, we'll teach you whatever you want to learn within reason and within our own kind of code of ethics. If you can
Which
find
is
it,
very
like you said,
short. It's a very
it's a
small
very
book,
short list.
a very small book of ethics. Yeah.
But but at the end of the day, yeah, it entirely depends on what you want to learn. And again, like Liam said, that's why it is always client centered. It has to move in your paradigm. It can't focus on ours, um, because otherwise you're just it'll be like being in a sweet shop and not knowing what to choose. If you know, whereas actually if you go, well, my favorite is this, well, we'll start there and we'll move on to the next one. And there'll be a natural progression for us going, well, actually, if you've done that, I think you said in one of the other ones, you know, you try and balance it out, don't you? Is a case of they tried this, it worked for them. Well, how about pushing it in that direction? What's new? Like, you know, but going back to Milady and her sock, it was a case of she knew enough about energy work to go, okay, well, this is the task I'm going to set you. I want you to, you know, go and go and spend time with this person. Putting it in the politest way I could possibly do. At that point,
That's what he
take
means. That's what he means. It was
take
sex
take
magic,
the
wasn't it? It was sex magic.
back in
Just
your
say
box.
it was, wasn't it? It
It
was.
wasn't sex magic. It wasn't sex
Yeah.
magic. That's what we're doing next week.
Oh, okay.
But she but it was a case of that's when she was could extract that energy, and then on the bonus of actually adding in the I keep going to say botanicals, biologicals, of the fact that obviously she stole a sock, um, was the perfect combination of, you know, that energy that's there, then converting that into a doll. Like, you know, it's perfect. Um, it you know, found found sock was the perfect fabric to use. She selected all the items via her nose, like, so not, because you know what my jars are like. I don't label what's in things. So she was using my stash to actually produce the stuffing material for the doll. So in that moment, like, she's going, oh, I like the smell of that, I don't like the smell of that, etc., etc. What would be the most attractive to her, and in order to represent that situation, you know, that connection, and then you work your way through. And I said, well, you'll only need one stone in there because obviously that's the stone where you've transferred some energy across. I wasn't expecting her to complete the doll, take the doll to him, and transfer during the time. It was borrowing an energy signature that was then added to that doll later, to allow to establish that connection. And then yeah, and then it's a case of leaving an opening as to where on that body you want it to manipulate. Obviously, for this one, um, you know, we were going for thought, and we can leave that there. But essentially, you know, we've put all sorts, and depending on what section you want to keep open. I've made dolls out of all sorts of things, everything from just grass in a field to to people's clothing, um, to like Liam said, pants are always a good one, because there is that combination. I very rarely,
especially if it's
beyond that,
used.
use biologicals. Yeah, but I've done a lot of with it because obviously, a lot of the sorts of clients that you get that ask these sorts of jobs are normally people that have left that person. So they don't necessarily have access. What they might still have is, oh, well, I suppose there's still his sock drawer, like from where they used to share clothes or whatever, or, that to dig deep, but it works the same way with any, we're focusing on dolls, but representational sympathetic magic is used in all sorts of forms. Um,
What about
candle
ritual?
work or ritual.
Yeah, because obviously
Well,
all these
yeah,
tools that ceremonial magicians and
yeah,
Wiccans and that use, they're representative of something.
yeah.
So the
They're all
sword
representative.
represents something. The cloak that you wear, we don't wear cloaks and that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. Not really my cup of tea,
we mostly
but
wear
I know some
Hollister.
people do. Yeah, that's like
So
my
yeah, and
cloak,
then
that
you
is.
you know your chalice would be for water, those sorts of things. Your chalice might be for that. Oh, I suppose I'm wearing one, aren't I? I've got my anti-Wiccan on. Um, so to me, to me, this is feather shaped. Obviously, I'm assuming that's what she was going for, the wonderful woman who put this together. But obviously, with the line down the middle, it very much looks like a feather. Now, I've collected feathers for years. You'll love working with feathers and pebbles and all that kind of stuff, because I tend to do my work with found objects rather than buying hundreds of crystals. Yes, I do have collections of crystals, but they're for very different purposes. Um, this one, this one has it both. Although that's a feather, it's also shield shaped, and I would use a lot of feathers in protection work. So to me, like when this kind of stumbled upon me, it's obviously something that works really well, um, at you know keeping, how do we put it, um, passing through swiftly, is what this tends to be used for. Is whether you've got when you're at psychic fairs and everybody's working different energies. Um, it's a case of it gets very loud, like you can't hear yourself think. And this is great. This is what I use that for. But the representational part in there is the fact that the feather is shaped there, even though it's not a feather. It's not a traditional representation of a feather. It's not metal that's been sculpted to look like a feather or an imprint. This is, a piece of stone that has then been wrapped in some copper and looks like a feather, or at least it does to me. Lots of other people would probably see something else, but um, that's what to some levels, probably a surfboard in there or whatever, that somebody else might see. But the
I
connection
see
is
a
personal
beach.
to me. Well, you probably would. The sunset. I'm
Yeah,
imagining ocean, water.
yeah.
Yeah, I get that. But it doesn't matter what other people see in it. It sees what that represents for you, or for the client. Obviously, if we were doing a project for somebody else, they would be the one that's selecting their own book of correspondences within their head. Um, the interesting thing will be that at the end of the day, we will often get, like I said, the book of correspondences out afterwards and
Here we
check,
go.
like, oh, actually, if you check that against, you go, I don't know what he's trying to show you right now, other than it's his cunning man's chest. Oh, okay. Yeah, the fact we would do all of it blind, and not tell you what until afterwards. We've even got blends in there of incense that represent different things, and they're then used. They're then
Sneakily,
used to sneakily upset,
to assess
so they
people.
don't know what's in them to assess them. Yeah. Um,
That's true.
but that it allows us to watch what they know, what they're capable of putting together, and gauging what their internal set of correspondences looks like. Um, but it works for us, and it seems to work for clients. So I can't knock the process.
I know
But
you're
yeah,
almost
what
professional.
almost.
Almost professional.
So okay, Ben sees something. I'm not sure what he sees.
He sees that you're making sense compared to all of these
Oh, okay,
crystal wielding new agers that go on and on and on about
okay,
unicorns, dolphins, and fairy healing.
yeah.
At least
So,
that's what
but
I
again,
presume. That's what I presume he means. I
are
don't
you,
know.
do you
I'm not a
feel do you
psychic.
feel
I just
better now?
train them.
Do you feel better now with all this venting that you've been doing today?
This has
Yeah,
been a very therapeutic session, I
therapeutic
have to say.
day.
We should do
Okay,
this at least once a month. We should do a
okay.
witchcraft live. People ask questions and go on about crap for like
We
an
do
hour,
we'll do
hour
Q
a
and A
month.
with
We
soft
should.
witchcraft.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. We can set it
Okay,
up.
we'll pick it. Okay, we'll find a way to do it.
Cheaper than therapy, we'll call it.
Cheaper than therapy. Hashtag
Hashtag
cheaper than
for
therapy.
witchcraft. I'm sweating like a pig a bit because it's absolutely boiling here. It's like 30 degrees,
Uh,
something like that. And then the window's closed because I can't open it because there's too much noise. But
okay.
yeah, you've done really
Oh,
well, I think.
Ben says he can see the feather.
Oh, you can see the feather.
Oh, okay. So, but yeah, it's one of those. It's representational magic. It's too it's too simple and complex at the same time. And it's actually part of a training program that allows you to be able to understand that for somebody else, actually be able to read them. Like I said, what we do in our consultations, we are reading that person, understanding why they're making those choices,
Hmm.
so we can best advise, and best do that for them. And the same comes with training, which is why we don't write. Oh, well, Paul's here. He does a lot of representational magic.
Oh, Paul. We like Paul.
So,
He's in one of the groups, and he often posts um, a lot of his own work, doesn't he? Spell
yeah,
work and stuff like that. And it's nice to see because that's the thing. Normally, whenever we speak to other practitioners, the majority of the time is people that have done something wrong that they're coming to us for help. It's not that
yeah.
often that we always get to meet people that actually know what they're doing. And Paul was one of those people that knows what he's doing.
Depends how long Paul's been here. Has Paul been
Yeah.
here long enough to for
I
me to
think
judge
there
why I
may
like
be a
the
little
feather?
bit of a delay when it comes to the comments that come up on our screen. But how long are you planning to go on and on about this for? Because I got to do my one at some point today.
Rude.
Unless
Oh,
you
okay, we have been.
unless you wanna cover divination in this video.
Well, we can if we
I'll
want.
tag you in the next video. We'll just carry on.
The rest, the rest of it's going on anyway, isn't it? Like it's all preset on the YouTube, ready to go,
For the
and they
great
can watch it
traveling
over and over
psychic
again.
there. Oh, why would you want to listen to us over and over again? Can you imagine?
Well,
I like listening to our own podcasts, if I'm fair, and I have to say I actually laugh at them just because of the
but
crap you
that's mainly
come
because
out
it's
with.
cringe.
The
The crap
stuff
I
you
come out
come out
with.
with about these Wiccans, honestly, it makes me
But the only
laugh
one
out
that's been
loud.
rude today on live has
I've
been
been
you.
very rude today
You've
online.
been
I've
very
been
rude
very
today.
rude. As long as one of us is professional, it's like the designated driver,
Harry's
isn't
the other one.
it? Yeah, exactly. You're the designated driver for this video.
Oh, okay.
I would say I'd
Okay.
edit it out later, but of course it's live and we can't do that.
No, no. But I suppose you could download the video later and cut it
I'll
in a way
cut
that
it for
makes us
YouTube.
seem nice.
Oh, I don't know. I
We can
suppose
cut
that
it in
would
a way
edit
that
it
makes us
down.
seem nice.
That could edit like an hour-long video down to a 15-minute segment, I suppose.
Uh, but yeah, it's just, has anyone got any questions about representational magic? I'm sure they don't.
Like
But
what it is.
you know, hey, I covered that at the beginning. You're the one that's been taking us on some kind of
I
jaunt
didn't take
through.
us on that many. Did you know why it is? It's because I got that old cow out for the divination thing later that we were talking about in a private
Oh,
conversation. Um,
yeah.
and she's been staring at me, so I reckon it's all her doing.
Transference, is it?
Yeah,
Transference.
it's transference. I feel her trying to,
Corrupt you.
yeah, and I am easily corruptible, as we all know. When it comes to
It just,
certain things,
yeah.
when it comes to certain things, I get rolled up.
Okay. Do you want to go straight into divination, or do you actually want to break and then you can go pull yourself back together
Well, we'll
and we
break.
can
We'll
start
we'll
again?
have a little break. I'll get a drink because I got to boil the kettle because I was gonna go through some tea leaf reading. Oh yeah, very
Okay.
tea leaf reading, all sorts of stuff. I'll
Oh,
get you to
okay.
read
You're going
me
to
tea
cover all
leaves.
of it today.
You read my tea leaves virtually, and you tell me and everyone else why I've been having a bad time
No,
lately.
this is your session, not mine.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. We are going to do another live in a bit. I've just got to check on a few
Yeah.
things and boil the kettle for some tea leaf reading, and we're going to be doing one on divination next and what divination is. I'll explain
Okay.
divination, so if you don't know what that is,
So what we're saying, we
just
come
tune
back
in.
about 5.
Sure, why not? That gives us just under
Yeah.
half an hour, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
All
sounds
right.
good. We'll do that.
Great.
We'll come back. We'll come back at 5, and
Yeah.
we'll do all talks about divination. We're going
Yeah.
to do any more talks about psychics, or are you actually going to focus on the actual
Well, I
craft?
mean, psychics are renowned for divination, so if we start talking about psychics and I get upset, I wouldn't say upset. If I get leery about psychics and start coming out with stories, again, you're the designated driver, so you'll
Okay.
have to
I'm,
keep me
I've got to be the
keep me
designated
on
driver. That's fine.
track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, boss. Okay. Right. So we'll see you all in about half an hour, assuming you
If
want to
you
come
can
back and listen
stand
to us
it, yeah.
ramble some more, and you can watch more of live breakdown of
Learning this is some genuine magic, this is.
sorry, yes, genuine magic,
Yeah.
not just watching Liam's breakdown on live on Facebook. But for whichever your reasons are, we'll see you at 5 o'clock.
Okay. I for learning